Okay, recording has begun. Josh, I will let you drive and I will take minutes per our new arrangement, which I quite like.
Sounds good. All right, so a quick review from last week's planning meeting. We have 2 upcoming scheduled meetings for this month, one tomorrow and one a week from tomorrow, to discuss a new ABI proposal for a WASM ABI, for which notes are already available, and planning for generators. And as a standing reminder, please take a look at the action items and take care of any items that are yours that you haven't already done, or if you've already done them, please check them off.
Can I actually ask about, so the action item written down was Taylor to close that RFC. I didn't actually think that that was what we wanted there. I left a comment on it when we originally made that action item about the RFC needs some amendments to clarify the behavior that's intended for backwards compatibility purposes. It sounds like the decisions there have actually been like resolved fairly well in the comments, thanks to some just like comments that Manish made, but they haven't ever been updated in the RFC itself. At this point, I feel like we kind of the right thing is to close it, but I kind of feel like that should be almost immediately followed up by somebody just reopening it with those fixes, if that makes any sense. I don't know if we have I don't know what the appropriate procedural step is there.
Well, if we're going to close it for the purposes of saying, no, we actually want somebody to immediately open a new one with feedback, then I think at a minimum that would be postpone.
So I'm clear on our current terminology around close and postpones, but that seems fine to me.
Yeah, I don't really care whether we call it close or postpone, but I just want to revisit. I quite like this idea. I think there's a need for a feature like this. I don't recall, and in fact, the UI of tagging the impl feels pretty okay to me, but I don't recall, like, was that a consensus opinion? Were there people concerned about that? I have vague memories that there were other approaches people liked.
Jane has a comment recently about libs being interested in this as well, which is...
Yeah, so this got linked in again recently because I guess libs has some methods that they want to add that overlap with existing trait methods, and they don't want, I'm sort of unclear. I think the thing there was that they get a lint when you import the trait currently, if they add an inherent method that has the same, that covers the behavior that importing the trait previously provided. And so now users no longer have to import that trait. I'm a little bit unclear on whether we would actually want this, like we would want this feature to change the behavior of that lint at all. So I'm kind of like, I don't really know that I think this is a good solution to that problem, but.
My understanding of the libs thing is it came up in people were asking for a inherent not method on bool. And the idea was that if that could be a inherent trait implementation of not on bool instead, then it would avoid the like, oh, that's weird, now there's a method, and then now you get a warning about you don't need that trait import that you had imported before in order to use not.
But I think I actually would still want us to lint on the, I guess my point is, I think I would still want us to lint on an unnecessary trait import if it was being imported to use an inherent trait method. Does that make sense?
So the proposal in the libs meeting was effectively that we do think that lint should exist, and the question was, should it be warn by default or allow by default, on the theory that warn would help you keep your import list pruned for the latest version of Rust, but allow would mean that you get by default the behavior of being able to be compatible with both old and new Rust without worrying about whether the trait method was imported. And either one is justifiable, but the we were less concerned about what that lint would be and more thinking there would be a lot of value in having inherent traits.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying I'm not sure. Sorry, go ahead, Nico.
I was just going to say, like, I feel like we can box the lint question and kick it down the road, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I think the lint question is orthogonal to what we do with this RFC, because I
Right.
think that is a separate set of problems that it's not clear to me that this RFC actually solves.
I agree with you on that. Like, let's wait till someone implements the lint or just talk about it then, but
Yeah, I would be more concerned about making sure that the inherent traits RFC stays alive to the extent we'd like it to. So if this RFC is more or less what we want and it's just that it needs to incorporate feedback, then either we should get the presenter of the RFC to do that or see if somebody else wants to pick it up and run with it. But I do absolutely think we should keep this alive.
there are two
Yeah, so-
possibilities. I mean,
Oh, go
we
ahead.
have the right to push to their branch. So
True.
we could just push the edits and merge it, which I sort of like because it keeps them having credit. But I guess if we rebase their commits, that's true too. I don't really care, but I would, the question is mainly, does one of us want to do it, or should we put out a call for someone to like incorporate these edits and make a new RFC?
So
The proposer has a comment from February, so they may still be around and available to do that.
I'd like to okay, go on, Mark.
I am a bit confused. So I think, Taylor, my understanding was you think that most of the concerns were resolved just in the comments, but my quick skim, admittedly, through, not too many comments, but I didn't read them in detail. It felt like there were a lot of open questions still, and they were kind of, I don't know, potentially difficult to answer. And so at least to me, it doesn't feel like there's a, sit down for an hour, retype some comments into the RFC text, and it's ready to merge type style.
I guess, so I guess I would, I don't think I would immediately follow up changes with a merge, because but I do think that like the next step for this is for someone to take this RFC and just kind of fill in answers to those missing bits. I agree they're left as sort of open questions, but I don't think that they're like, I don't know, I don't think they're particularly difficult to resolve. Like, I think there are reasonable choices for all of them that are like maybe not at the level of like implementation details, but like the RFC should specify a choice that like is reasonable and works, and like then people can, if people want to bike shed over whether it's the exact best formulation of it, they can. But I guess I'm saying that the RFC is written is just incomplete.
Right. That's what I was getting at.
So it sounds like we want to have somebody pick it up and work on it, and that would run counter to closing it. So two options would be either we could RFC bot postpone, and that would close the issue and somebody could reopen and pick it up later, or we could leave it open and check back with a presenter and see if we could get it revived. Taylor, it seems like you've got a pretty good handle on this one. Would you be up for trying to reach the presenter or shake up some interest?
I mean, I don't know that I have contact information from them outside of GitHub.
What I would propose is that we write a comment that says, hey, we would like to see this, like, especially if you could summarize, like, it needs the answers to these questions specified. We think that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah. I'm happy to leave a comment summarizing those and then saying what we want.
Right. And then sort of at so-and-so, do you think you'll be able to do this? If not, maybe someone else wants to pick up the torch, and we could then, if by next week nobody's answered, we can tweet about it and try to get some more attention.
Yeah. Indicating that we're generally inclined is probably a good way to, like, encourage people to actually get re-enthusiastic about it, right? Because just saying there's open questions without saying how we're feeling doesn't necessarily make someone want to actually put in the effort.
Yeah.
Sure.
I do want to check in on that. I just reread the backlog bonanza, and it did seem like everyone was pretty positive then. Like, I don't want to ask this person to pick up the torch if we're like we're not sure that, not 100% sure, but if we're not mostly sure that we're gonna see it through. Do you know what I mean? So I don't really know exactly what the outstanding questions are. I know that I feel positive on the concept and feel pretty comfortable that if Taylor feels like there are answers, I'm okay with that, but I just want to check with anyone else that
Yeah,
if there are people
I
who have
think-
major doubts, I'd like them to express them.
Yeah, I mean, I
I'm a
think
fan
that-
of this as well in theory, in concept.
Okay.
I think the outstanding questions are mostly around like is the set of things that show up as inherent methods, does it match like the set of methods that you wrote in the trait impl, or is it all the methods in the trait, in which case how do you resolve new methods being added to the trait conflicting with already existing inherent methods?
Okay.
And you basically, I mean, you just have to pick a semantics, and I think there are a couple just reasonable options. I don't know.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Okay. I mean,
it
that
doesn't
seems
seem impossible.
right. All right, I agree. That doesn't seem impossible. Okay. And we kind of have precedent that, I mean, I don't know what you're thinking, but we have precedent that points the way towards inherent methods winning, right?
Yes.
So seems odd that you would
Sounds
add them.
reasonable.
Seems
Yeah.
odd
So
to pick
it's
the
like
other choice.
inherent methods win over, trait
Right.
inherent methods or something, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
That seems like the only possible choice, actually. Because if you couldn't pick the other way, because then you'd be changing the semantics of existing code. You could go to ambiguity, but okay, very good.
Okay, going on to the other item on here. Taylor, did you also want to discuss RFC 2316?
This is the unsafe.
Yeah. So I had messaged Scott a bit about this, and I don't know, that Zulip thread kind of died. I pinged a couple times, but I don't know, maybe Scott, if you want to chat a little more, or I don't know how you're feeling about it. I was kind of hoping.
I think I ended up feeling pretty good about it. I think I'm convinced by the well, this is how unsafe works normally, so it's another unsafe trap, but there's lots of unsafe traps, so that's okay. And it's not a safety unsafe trap, so that's the best kind of unsafe trap.
Okay.
The only question I'd have is if we expect this RFC to do the same thing for const, because it would be pretty strong precedent that const should do this. But I don't know if that's what we expect const to do, or if that's in the const plan of how const should work.
The current const RFC, I think, just has const on the whole trait impl rather than having it on each of the methods. But I can't, I just as a user would find it extremely surprising if I couldn't also put it on the methods. So maybe that's, I don't know how other people feel about that. That feels like oh yeah, of course we should do that to me.
I don't know. I don't know if I treat const the same as unsafe personally. That doesn't intuitively make sense that you could, the same way that unsafe is treated here as an over constraint, that const as a keyword would make the same sense in those contexts.
Interesting.
I also
I'm just
don't
not
have
sure.
an intuitive mapping of the two.
My thought there is if you're implementing default, you could say const fun on your default that would only apply for your type, couldn't be used generically as a const fun, but specifically for that one type, it could be const fun.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I would have, I don't know. I guess other folks disagree maybe, but I would have expected that to quote unquote just work.
Yeah,
So,
it's a reverse mapping, right? Like with unsafe, you can omit it, whereas with const you can add it, which is
That's
kind
exactly
of
that's a better match my intuition of what would happen. So that's why I'm saying it's not the same.
So I think it potentially makes sense, but I would propose that we shouldn't be doing new design in this meeting right now. So I would suggest that we keep the RFC as it is to specify the ability to omit unsafe, and somebody can always propose an RFC to handle something with const if they believe that it's as simple as this.
Yeah,
I
to
would
clarify,
also
Josh, I
suggest
think
that
the
there's
point
a
is
further.
that I think the point that Scott was making is that if we didn't do this for const, but we did do this for unsafe, that would be kind of, that would feel to them like kind of an odd inconsistency. And I was saying I would resolve that inconsistency by doing it for both, but it sounds like Felix and Nico perhaps feel that that inconsistency doesn't bother them so much.
I'm just saying that doing it doesn't mean like it's the same treatment in both cases. It's you have to do a cement, like if it's a matter of like saying that these things are over constraints and it's the nature of an over constraint is just different for unsafe versus const, and that one
I mean,
is
they're inverted in terms of
covariant to
which
this
one you
contravariant or some other way of
specify.
saying it, like that fine. But the point is, it seems like a lot of, like Josh said, this seems like a little bit of design work. Maybe it's obvious design work, but it's still design work that I think should be left for a future
Right.
thing.
Well, in
Yeah,
particular,
I
const
clarify,
has
I'm not
a,
saying that we should fold the const thing into this RFC.
so const also has an additional bit of complexity on top of that unsafe does not have, which is there's been a lot of discussion about const handling in generic types, not const generics, but rather how do you write an impl that can be const if you're operating on a const object, but can also be const non-const if you're operating on a non-const object. How do you specify that the const passes through a generic?
For what it's worth, we also actually have an RFC that resolves that has checkboxes already done for, I think, all existing members of the Lang team. Like
Which RFC are
currently,
you referring to?
I'm trying to remember what it's called.
Is it the one with the question mark const bounds or whatever?
Exactly.
Yeah, I
Right.
kind of feel like we should, it's sounding to me like we should try to close both of those and pull them together into one sort of unified thing, but I don't know. Or at least we should talk about them together. I want to
So
review them.
So I think what I'm suggesting is it sounds like there is another RFC that addresses that particular bit of interaction with const. I would be all for us having a separate RFC or follow-up or similar that unifies this and says, hey, you can also do with const what this RFC did with unsafe. But I don't think that we should immediately assume that we should do the obvious mapping with const without at the very least specifying how this interacts with whatever the other RFC number is.
Oh, I think that's definitely true. I'm just saying that I think that we will want to do that thing for const. And so I think we should go ahead and do the thing for unsafe because I'm not concerned about a future where we have inconsistency.
So that I would agree with, that I think we will want to address this for const. I don't think we have to do it as part of this RFC. I think we can do a follow-up that handles unsafe. And I think we will end up, sorry, that does const. I think we will do that follow-up.
So unless anyone objects, then I'm going to go ahead and FCP merge the unsafe RFC.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay. Thanks.
I don't think we have a like impl unsafe ord plan anytime soon that would cause weird questions with it the way there are for const. So
though people have asked for that.
yeah.
It has quite different and more complicated semantics than the rest of the stuff we talked about. So I think that's
This would be an impl that's unsafe to rely on, as opposed to the current unsafe impl, which is unsafe to.
It would be something like there's the safe version of ord and the unsafe version of ord, but they're sort of the same trait. But by saying that you implement unsafe, then you're actually eating all the rules specifically. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, the version I've heard is like, I want to write a sort function that was memory unsafe if I have an inconsistent ord impl, right?
Right. Okay. I mean that.
And this is sort of the same problem that we wanted to avoid with having the const default trait and the const add trait and etc.
Sort of. Yeah. But not.
Yeah. Sort of, but not quite. Agreed.
Okay. Shall we move on to the next set of sections?
Yes, let's.
All right. We have two pending proposals to discuss. One of them is Lang Team 86, allowing the compiler to eagerly drop values. Nico, you had an action item to make sure that there was a Lang Team design note on this?
Yeah, I put that in there to say I haven't done this yet, but I will.
Okay.
Let's move on.
And then there is a proposal change path attribute behavior of modules that the pitch here is to handle module paths with more regularity when you specify an explicit source path. I think we very briefly touched on this one last week and didn't come to any hard conclusions other than it does seem like someone should work on this.
Leveraging additions, is that the plan?
Yeah, it looks like
It would have to, yes.
Presumably not 2021.
Right.
Okay. I don't remember this, but I have battle scars from Taylor working through it for the.
Right.
I just remember it's horrible. I don't know.
So
I'm in
I
favor
think
of it
we
if
have-
people think it's more obvious, or I'm not opposed to it necessarily.
Yeah, I remember this caused a bunch of issues when I tried to fix this up before. I don't know. I kind of don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole.
But yeah,
But
I sort of simultaneously don't care, and I'm not super opposed. But I don't really remember
I mean,
how
another
confusing our current
option-
behavior is. It's probably pretty confusing.
Fairly confusing, yeah.
pretty
There
confusing.
are other options we could consider, including removing in an addition some of the ability to combine nested inline modules and path statements if we felt that was the easier way to regularize this. But either way, I think someone should look at this. It sounds like we have some consensus that somebody should look at this and try to fix it.
But also, I guess we have general agreement that the current state is confusing.
I mean, just the ability to use path from an inline module is not good.
So should we? Okay. I'm not opposed if somebody wants to sort of be the liaison. Let's put it that way.
This is one of those things that feels to me like, I don't know, I could see the argument for it's a path that works like a file system and it's on modules, so it works like modules. And the problem is that those don't necessarily map perfectly. And I don't know that
That is
there's ever
exactly
going to be a perfect answer.
I think the
I know-
additional thing that makes this complicated is that it got worse in the 2018 edition when we introduced the possibility that you could either have something.rs or something/mod.rs, and they both meant the same thing. And that apparently also interacts with how you use a path statement, because those will have two different path behaviors.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, we special case files named mod.rs in the code so that it does a reasonable thing.
Reasonable is a stretch, I
What
think.
can someone?
Well, like does a thing that was backwards compatibility preserving enough to not
Right.
break the libraries that were
Accurate, yes.
trying to do this before. Yeah.
Nico,
It
you were
doesn't
going to say
seem-
something?
I'm just reading over the code, and I don't know. It's not obviously. It sort of makes sense to me, so I'm a little confused. What
I mean,
exactly
it makes
is?
sense. I guess my personal intuition would always be that path would be file system based, and what we have now is definitely not that. But what we have now, I feel like, is like relatively consistent for making the other choice while retaining backwards compatibility.
So okay. So basically, path right now is based on where the source path would be if this were a file. Is that roughly correct?
Yeah, no, that's a correct understanding. So for inline
Yeah.
modules, you think about where the current like file would be that corresponds to the module, right? So if you have
Yeah.
a bunch of nested modules and then a path inside of it, it's like as if you wrote that path from the, mod.rs inside that,
Right.
the corresponding directory.
And I
Can we
recall
just-
for compatibility us having a conversation around the time the 2018 module system was being designed that effectively said we wanted uniformity where you could take the contents of an out-of-line module and inline them inside braces and your behavior shouldn't change. And I think that was why we had this, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right behavior, just why that behavior is what it is, I believe.
How unreasonable would it be for this to be like another option on the attribute or a different attribute or something? If it's not a breaking change, then that might offer a whole bunch of different possibilities.
As in change it from path equals to source equals or something and have that have regularized behavior?
Like file system relative path equals blah. Probably not literally that because that's super long, but maybe that's also not a problem because.
Sure. And then it wouldn't have to be an addition change. It could just be if you want reasonable behavior, use this. If you want backward compatible behavior, do this.
Yes.
I don't know how
That's
painful
not
that
quite
is
how I
for the
would pitch it.
parser that needs to know multiple things, but
It doesn't sound that painful.
Well, again, we shouldn't be doing fresh design in this meeting. So it sounds like we have a strong consensus that someone should fix this. And we have a few different possible alternatives. So I think the two things that need doing would be to mention any of the new alternatives, like we could introduce a new option in the issue as a summary, and someone should pick this up and shepherd this, which leads us to the who wants to bell the cat question. Would anybody like to champion this?
I actually want to object to something you said earlier. I actually don't know that I am part of a consensus for
Yes, I agree.
changing the behavior here.
I'm not,
think
that's
this
what I
is
was going to
not
say
worth-
too.
I
Okay.
think this is not worth the effort that it's going to take, and it has to happen across an edition boundary. And I think it's too late for the 2021 edition. So if we're having an MCP here, it's for a feature that we'll deploy in 2024. And I just don't think I care that much about it to say that we should have somebody putting effort into this.
I don't
So
care
that's a
about
fair
when
statement.
I don't care about when it will deploy, but I do sort of feel like I want a more convincing argument than this seems really strange. Like I want user reports saying people come to internals saying I'm confused or something, some evidence that it's actually impacting people.
I will say that, whenever I've encountered the confusion here, which I did actually relatively recently while working on some stuff in Stud, it was not entirely it's confusing, but once you write it, it works and it does something, and maybe you don't fully understand what that is, but path is so rare to use that it doesn't seem to me that there is worth in investing significant effort in trying to make it very intuitive. I would rather do something else that makes it even less necessary to use it. But it already is really really rare. So.
And the path has to exist, right? So it's not like this is one of those things where if you put it and it's wrong, it'll silently compile and do something really weird.
The chances of you getting it wrong in a way that still sort of works are very, very slim.
And also the error message tells you specifically, like if there isn't a file there, it tells you specifically where it was looking for the file. So it's like, I don't know, I feel like it's pretty clear in explaining itself.
Right, so except for the case where someone's reused the same name for multiple things and you do end up with a successful resolution to the wrong thing.
Yeah, that's your fault.
Well, and even then, that assumes that you reuse the same name and the modules have the same contents and their use,
Well, you might be surprised why.
Yeah,
anyway, you can definitely get confused.
Well, that raises so I think that raises another point, actually. A minute ago, somebody pointed out that path is relatively rare, which I would agree with. And one other approach to this, rather than trying to make path easier to work with, would be to look at the cases where people have to use path and find a way to make that easier. The most common case I've seen, for example, is conditional compilation, where it's easier to say config if I'm on Windows, then grab foo windows.rs, otherwise grab foo unix.rs or similar, and then import that as foo. That could potentially be done without path by declaring both modules somehow and then importing the one that you actually need with a pub use. So there are ways to avoid using path potentially. I'm wondering if what we should be doing is integrating this better into the language so you never have to specify a file system path.
I mean, I think you already don't, right? Like like you said, there are already other ways to solve that problem.
I'm
Right.
just not
So if
convinced it's
there's a-
worth this much time, even the time we're using in this meeting right now.
Right.
So
Well,
I'm sort
I
of
think
inclined
the
to.
case I'm suggesting is I think we would not just need somebody saying this is confusing. I think you're right. We would also need somebody saying this is confusing and here's why I have to use path and can't use something better.
Right. And or just evidence that it's hitting that it's a common frustration that users hit.
There are linked issues that, you see people at least chiming in with their particular cases where they hit problems. So it's not like there's 0 user reports here.
Right. I have to drop off for another meeting, but I'll follow up on those other 2 RFCs, and I don't know.
All right.
I think we shouldn't do anything about path.
I don't see those issues. I mean, I'm clicking on the issues, but I don't see a lot of comments on them.
You don't, the links and related work and
Yeah,
All right,
you can
well.
click on them. There's just like very quiet issues.
I guess it depends on your point of view.
They're mostly from 2019 with Taylor and Ehus going back and forth that I see.
So I think I'm convinced based on the conversation we just had that this is not worth the time and effort to change. So would someone be up for writing up the consensus here of saying we would need some evidence that there are specific reasons people have to use path and can't use something else and also find this confusing?
I'll do it.
Okay. And if anyone does have evidence of here's a case where you absolutely have to use path, I think we should treat that as something we should fix so that you never have to use path.
Right.
Maybe by 2024, we could just remove path.
I wouldn't be totally against some cool feature for like splitting out the implementations per target, but anyway.
Yeah, conditional compilation of large blocks of code needs improvement.
All right, let's move on.
Okay, next up we have the const.ub RFC 3016. That RFC is currently in FCP and it looks like it has all of the checkboxes it needs. So we're just waiting on the 10-day period, which is 4 days from now. Next
Sure.
up, we have
I
p-high
want to say
issues.
one minor thing.
Go on.
There is in this one, not about the RFC itself, about the fact that we have 3 boxes out of 5 checked. I'm not sure that this rule that says like, I don't know. I'd sort of like, I feel like we allow things to go forward with relatively narrow consensus with a team as small as ours. I know the meeting. I'm debating about proposing a change to the triage
I
bot
would
to
actually
say like
agree
if
with
the
that.
team is less than certain size, everyone has to check otherwise.
Or it's at least 2/3 or something.
Right, some tweak. Maybe
Right,
a
I
way
think
for
we
the team
already
itself
have
to
an at
decide.
least strictly more than half because the cargo team is currently 4 people and 2 boxes is not enough to proceed. You need 3. I'm guessing the rule is strictly more than 50%. So we could tweak that threshold a little bit and say it must be strictly more than 60%, and then 3 out of 5 would not suffice.
Yeah, I've also had some other things I wanted to change, so I don't know. Maybe I'll write up a proposal and see if
Do
I
you think
can
it'd be
find
better to
someone
focus on
implement it.
finding new team members?
I want to do that too.
No argument with that, but I would support the idea of requiring 4 out of 5 as long as we have 5.
Right. Anyway, let's keep going.
Yep. Next up, we have a p-high issue on Rustlang Rust 82633 regarding function types and unsized. We previously had a consensus on this. There's now a PR implementing the consensus we requested as of, it looks like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it needs to be
So-
reviewed.
Yeah,
Exactly.
That's on Felix and I think.
it is. Yeah.
Okay. No self-admonishments in the minutes, please. But by all means, please make it an action items for yourselves then.
Right. Just admonish me, Nico. That's fine.
No.
All right. Next up, we have one nominated PR for Rustlang reference. This was discussed previously, number 970, document raw pointer to usize casts and vice versa. Nico is going to leave a summary comment proposing to close this on the basis that this is not ready for reference work yet because we're not actually sure what we want the semantic to be here.
Right, I just didn't do it yet, but I will.
So next we have PRs and issues on Rust Lang Rust that are nominated. 51999, allow panicking in constants, the tracking issue for 2345, the RFC. And Nico is proposing that this is ready to stabilize if we get a stabilization report.
Well, somebody else did, to be honest. I haven't really reviewed the
Oh,
state of
okay.
the feature. But I was saying, in order for me to review the state, I would want a stabilization report. I don't know if anyone else is familiar with it.
Then I saw the original RFC. I don't know the current state of the tracking issue. I would suggest that we drop the nominated label until we have that stabilization report. But I'm familiar enough with this to think, assuming it is working as designed and we have a stabilization report, then yes, I think we want this. It's been around for several years.
That's how I feel too. I think I remember I skimmed the thread at some point. It's not very long. I'm just looking over it again now. And it seemed like
There was 100
okay,
plus comments.
I was gonna say, I take that back. It's just that there's a GitHub view more that I didn't click. The latest round of comments at least seem to be focused on like how good is the error message or something, which doesn't seem that much of a blocker.
Also, hopefully, once this is stabilized, people can start using it in various crates that are doing compile time checks of various kinds.
Right.
Yep. Okay. Do we want to leave a comment saying that we're generally positive?
Yeah, I think we should do that.
Okay, I can do that.
Great.
Sounds good. All right. Next up, we have implement new lint for detecting buggy pointer to int casts. So this one is 81789. There was some previous discussion of this. Didn't reach a hard consensus into the issue. And so Taylor had an action item to write up a summary. Taylor isn't here, so I think we can move on from this item and just make sure that it's confirmed that it is listed in the open action items.
It is. I copied that text from there.
Okay, then I think we can leave this one for now.
Yep. I'll ping Taylor on.
Is it
on
blocked
Zoom.
on the creator run? Which is, I guess, queued and didn't actually run or something?
I don't think that's run yet, but I don't think it's blocked on that. It seemed like, if I remember, we had some sort of just general, like it was not clear. This was addressing, it wasn't clear what exactly we wanted. And this seemed to be addressing the problem in a kind of solving a different problem that happened to address the original lint almost by accident. At least that was my impression. But
Yeah, Crater should be complete in like 5 days.
yeah. But I guess creator never hurts.
So the expected time for creator is 21 days then? Or 19 days?
Or more,
Not
yeah.
usually, but there was a long backlog of Crater recently because there were some issues with the Crater infrastructure and a backlog built up, and now those
Okay.
issues are being cleared up.
Thank you. Okay.
Individual runs 2.5 days for check or something last time I did one.
Sounds about right, yeah. Okay. Next up, we have 83213. There was, this one looks like it already got pre-triaged, that it's blocked waiting on implementation issues and doesn't need any discussion. So unless somebody thinks otherwise, let's move on.
Yeah, I removed the nomination as well.
Okay. 83312, parser remove support for inner attributes on non-block expressions. This was a proposal from Petrochinkov. Nico has done an FCP merge. So I think this is just awaiting boxes.
Yeah, but I did that just this morning. People might want to, I don't know if people
Right.
will be into it. I was just trying to keep us moving. specifically, it looks, how I understood Petroshenkov's comment was that this was sort of going past what the RFC had requested and enabling inner attributes. So specifically, if you click over on Petroshenkov's comment, there's some good examples, which I'll copy into the minutes. But like inner attributes on parentheses, inside of the arms of a match, inside of struct constructors, which actually I don't really like them being in most of those places. I don't mind the parentheses necessarily, but and this is kind of removing them. I didn't fully understand exactly why, but I trusted Petroshenkov to have a reason.
Presumably you can still put outer attributes in these places to the extent that they are taggable with attribute. This is just dropping the ability to put an inner attribute, which does seem like it would remove a source of confusion.
That's right.
Yeah, it's worth noting that this is
But-
technically still unstable surface area. It's just that our attribute checking in general is pretty buggy in terms of stability, and just more broadly.
Yeah.
So some of this has slipped onto stable.
Yes. The only thing
Do
I
we
would say
currently-
is, I mean, the only advantage to inner attributes for some of these cases is the lack of ambiguity around extent. Like this clearly applies to the parentheses. You know, if you had like a +5 or something, it would be a little less clear. Does this apply to the plus or to the parentheses? Do you see what I
But
mean?
it also
I think
could
that's a
apply
good
to the
argument for
expression
one.
one. Like,
No, not the inner form.
well, I mean, like if you put another pair of parentheses, I don't know. I don't think the ambiguity argument is entirely
I don't-
obvious to me.
I don't understand what you're saying. It seems completely unambiguous to me. So I'd like to know how it's not. Like it seems like it has to apply to the containing expression, which is the parentheses.
Right. I'm saying that if you like, it could apply to this.
Sure.
Well, if you
it's
did
not
that,
just
then it would
could,
apply
if
to
you
the
wrote that,
inner.
it
like,
does.
that still seems unambiguous to me. It's just different. Then it applies to this pretty clearly.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, well.
I sort of agree, just that the other meaning is what happens if you take the exclamation mark out. So if you know about the exclamation mark form, you sort of know about the non-exclamation mark forms. You know the exclamation mark form has to be the different one. But
whether it's obvious, I guess, is different. But yeah, I see only one. Like
I hear you that it is likely that the meaning is not ambiguous if you think about it, but if you're skimming the code, I think that it is relatively not
yeah, I agree with
obvious.
that. It
So
may not
that
be
I would
obvious.
agree with, and that sounds like an argument in favor of this change, which would remove it so that
Right.
it's
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no objections.
yeah, when I read the comment in there, I went, oh yeah, great, perfect. I would be quite happy to never see this.
honestly, I would be quite happy to never see inner attributes anywhere other than the top of a module file, where is the only place that you have to use them.
I think they're pretty useful and important in blocks because you might want to be able to do things like likely and unlikely that target the only the then part of a match or of an if or a specific match arm,
Interesting.
and we don't
That's a
have a
good
way
case. Yeah,
to do that. But
fair enough.
that's the main reason I didn't. We're not giving that up, and that was my main concern is I didn't want to give that up, but this isn't, so it's okay.
Sure. This is just removing it in expressions, not in
Right.
blocks, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Seems fine.
I'll put a note about that.
Yeah, still there in still there in expression blocks, still there in module blocks, still there in files.
Sounds good. Okay, well, the FCP now has 3 out of 5 checkboxes and is currently in final comment period, albeit we just said that we would probably like that to become 4 out of 5.
Yeah, that's all right.
But in any case,
It's just a general concern, not a specific concern.
Sure.
About any particular change.
next up we have stabilize extended key value attributes, 83366. I proposed this for FCP merge recently. And this allows you to use macro expansions in the value of a key value attribute. The primary value of this is that it's being requested specifically by the Rust doc team because they would like to use doc equals include as a replacement for a dedicated doc include mechanism that had ambiguous semantics. It looks like there is a concern registered on it from Nico. Do you want to talk briefly about that concern?
Sure. We had some discussion, and my concern is not with the state of the code, but with the state of the documentation around the code. But it is an interesting case, so I'll explain it. It has to do with, consider this example, where these are procedural macros, and these are so-called inert, or doc is a so-called inert macro, meaning that it's not a procedural macro. It's not a decorator. What happens today is that this macro does not get expanded until both of the procedural macros have run. I don't know about derive. I forget derive has funny. Derive is funny. But the key analogy that made this make sense to me. So basically, first of all, to explain decorators, in case people don't remember, because I didn't, I did, but I wasn't 100% sure. Decorators apply outside in. So essentially this stuff is sort of uninterpreted until after the decorator is finished. So this first decorator gets this as input, these tokens. The second decorator, it's effectively moves the inert attribute down and it gets these as input, those tokens. And then the macro expands. And this is kind of analogous to something like this. At least I consider that analogy to be reasonably valid, where the macro also is not expanded until after this decorator has run. So the original comment said in the comment or in later discussion that it was undefined when this would execute, and I'm asking that it be. It said it was undefined but observable, and I'm asking that it just be defined.
Interesting.
I don't think we could change it anyway, because
so it does
make.
Well, it does make sense that we that we hand those attributes the full token list from what follows, just because they're allowed to invent new attributes.
Right.
The idea of macros in value position in a key value attribute is new. So technically we could define a semantic for it that we would prefer.
It's not actually new, turns out, but it's kind of new.
I thought it was not yet stable.
Yeah, it's stable in a weird way. You can you can't do this code is not stable. However, one can write this code. This is sort of, I think this, I don't know if this was accidental or exactly what, but you can do this. I think it was kind of a backwards compatibility accidental thing. Apparently this works unstable and it has the semantics I described above.
Well, that's fascinating.
Yeah, this is commonly used in Stode and elsewhere.
Yeah, I didn't know that was commonly used, but okay.
Well, in any case, it sounds like your concern on that RFC is just, or on that issue is just proposing that it should explicitly document the behavior to match what the behavior will actually be rather than making it unspecified.
Yeah.
Seems reasonable.
So one question I do have, I note that Petroshenkov left a comment 28 days ago asking two questions, one of them about whether we want to allow arbitrary expressions in this position. And it looks like there was no resolution of that, at least that I can see. He's not aware of any blockers to doing so, but I know that we discussed in the past not necessarily wanting that. And I'm curious if we want to allow that. As far as I can tell, it's not relevant to the docs team or Rustock team request. So
as far as I can tell, it's not clear to me that this PR would enable that. It's is that actually being enabled here, or is that just a discussion about what we might want to expand this to in the future?
it is my impression that it is enabled with this PR, but I haven't read the code. I don't know a lot, but
The impression
my
I had
reading.
from skimming it was that it only allowed macros, but that may have been ambiguous, and it was just that we only care about macros.
So
Yeah.
that's right. I'm not sure. This was the text that Jin wrote that gave me the impression, or maybe it was that, maybe something else, gave me the impression that this only supported macros. Unstable. I'll quickly check the code, but that is a good question. I'd prefer not to accidentally stabilize something we didn't mean to.
That seems worth confirming, yes.
That said, I don't really have a big, I mean, what we'd be stabilizing is that it can be tokenized more or less, right? It's still an error once it hits the parser, I think.
I see. That's less of a concern.
Yeah. Well, I think that the question I would have, and potentially a sort of reason
Yeah,
to
I think
hold
Mark is
off. I
right.
don't know.
I think the PR does everything because I don't see any code that like, it's only
Tries to
deleting
do it
some stuff
partially.
that gives errors, right? It's not doing anything else. So unless there's some other logic I'm not aware of, which there might be. Certainly unclear, and there aren't tests that make it clear.
In the comment thread, the PR author said like arbitrary expressions can be added later and still be backwards compatible, right? Question mark. So I think their intention was that they didn't want to try to inject that as a feature and have it be stabilized inadvertently. I think they just maybe didn't realize that that would be an outcome of this.
I don't know, but whatever the PR does doesn't matter as much as what we want to do.
Sure. I'm just trying to express what the author's intent might have been in terms of guiding us towards a consensus with them more quickly. That's all.
Yes. I think nobody's arguing in favor of it. Is that true?
Someone in the comment thread said they'd like it, but I don't think that's but no one here is arguing in favor of it, I don't think.
Yeah, I know it's like there are many cases where it feels like it's desirable. Like I know Serde has a bunch of attributes that are, nicer if you don't pass a string and you can just pass an expression in some sense. But my worry is that expressions bring a lot in, from what I recall, past discussions of potential like unresolved questions of which sort of context they expand in, especially if it's like inside a function. Can I use, a local variable, and does hygiene like magically work, or what is the story there? And so I feel like potentially asking to exclude that from this stabilization makes sense.
It's hard for me to
I
understand
think
how
it's
that
safe
would
to
be
say that
true for arbitrary expressions, but not true for macros though. Because
if the macro can't receive arguments, I don't know. Yeah,
well, that's I
don't
guess
know.
the question. Like, can it, like, if you do a real simple check, right? I mean, you see what I'm trying to say? You could write something like,
Yeah,
arbitrary expression here. So I don't,
it does seem like it does seem like the only thing that the Rustdoc team is actually interested in is like literally include stir and maybe concat, both of which are a lot simpler and feel sort of uncontroversial because they only receive like tick static stir and at compile time. And so maybe just saying we stabilize those and nothing else is sufficient, and we can leave these questions for later.
I think we should.
Well,
I'm going to
I think
register a
it makes
concern
sense
to
to
get this
allow
better understood. I think that's enough for
that. I would agree with. I think that there is value in allowing other macros, if only because people may want to wrap things like include stir in their own macros, and that should still work. But I do think that we should get clarification on what this proposal is actually enabling and what it isn't before we let it go through.
It makes me wonder a lot about what it means to parse an expression there in like unstableness checking, and whether it's a token, whether it's parsed as tokens, so you could say use a try block on stable in there.
Yeah, I think
Like,
it's
is it actually an
parsed as
expression
tokens.
parser, or is it tokens?
No, it's tokens.
It should be tokens. Yeah, I'm
pretty sure this is arbitrary
80%
token
sure.
based. Yeah, we can
Okay, so it's
confirm
not
that too.
expressions, it's tokens.
Right.
I think that's the case, but there is the mild complication. I think maybe if you have a macro call and that takes an argument of an expression, then that will potentially parse as an expression, like before it hands it to the macro, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I would expect that to occur at the time of macro invocation, which would mean after,
Right.
but I'm
Yeah,
not sure.
I guess that's true.
Okay, why don't
Okay,
we,
So
why
who
don't
is
we
going to
ask some
register that
questions?
concern, Nico?
Yeah, I'll do it. Give me an action item.
Okay. Then I think given that you're going to write that up and provide a concern for let's make sure we understand the behavior correctly, then I think we can move on.
Yes, that's an
So
action item mark in case.
Yeah, I
next
noted it.
up, we have 83386, which switched over to using pat param instead of pat 2015. And that is currently an FCP and doesn't need any further discussion unless people want to talk about it. Then we have all of 2 minutes and 4 items. We're not going to get to all 4 of them. Is there anything people want to prioritize rather than just going on to the very next one?
I'd like to look at this one, roll up, merge, revert, because it's simple.
Okay.
The short version is we had accepted pub macro rules, but then we kind of backed off from moving forward with that because a bunch of annoying problems arose. And the implementation is kind of incomplete. It doesn't work across crates and stuff. And this PR basically just reverts it because no one's actively working on it and it's just kind of dead code. That's what I wanted. I think we should do that, but I wanted to check in with folks. If anyone had a concern, I would say something like, if you do want to see this continue to be developed, it's fine with me, but then I want you to promise to put time into resolving problems.
I would love to see this change happen, but I also have no problem with it being reverted given that we want further design work to happen before it does.
Okay.
If we're going back to the drawing board on design, then we want to revert this by all means so that people don't start poking at it in unstable and thinking, oh, hey, this is what I want, or this isn't what I want when it's going to change.
I always support deleting code.
Okay, great. I thought that might be an
Okay.
easy one. That's why I wanted to do it.
Sounds good.
Oh, and we ran out of time for the next one, even though it's also an easy one.
Maybe we can,
83595.
people can leave comments if they want, maybe.
I think it's just that's by design.
All right. Let me just call attention real fast to 84133. I'll do it on Zulip though, because our meeting's over.
Okay.
And I'm gonna move to FCP it even though.
Yeah, super excited about that proposal.
All right, ciao. Or maybe we already did move to FCP. All right, thanks everybody.
All right, bye.